Welcome back to the 100 Movements podcast. Today, we're going to be diving into the mDNA element of organic systems, the structures and frameworks that allow movements to grow and multiply without losing their life. This is the last episode of our series on mDNA, so if you've missed previous episodes, be sure to go back and catch them. Our guest today is a close friend of 100 Movements and of me and Brian, Rob Wegner. Rob is the co-author of The Starfish and the Spirit, Unleashing the Leadership Potential of Churches and Organizations. He is one of the most influential humans in this space, and I am very excited to interview him today. He is also one of the founding leaders of Kansas City Underground, a network of reproducing disciples and microchurches across the Kansas City area that has become this living laboratory for organic systems in action. So, Rob, you've spent years showing how structures can strangle life or set it free. And today, I'm excited to explore what organic systems look like, why they're so critical for movement, and how ordinary leaders can begin living this out. So, thanks for being here. And I'd love to kind of give you a chance just to start by sharing a little bit of your journey in this space.
I'm glad to be here with you guys. I'm glad it's the last one in the series, so we can burn this thing down. We can crash it into a wall, and there's nothing to worry about because it's the last one. It'll be done.
No ramifications. We're never doing any more podcasts after this.
Ever.
I guess, my journey, one of the things that just pops into my head is being really fortunate to have a mentor, someone who discipled me when I was a teenager, who was really passionate about spiritual awakenings and past revivals and the role that young people in particular played in those, and exposing us to those stories and inviting us into the possibility of those stories still being able to be written. And that was amazing, because I do think organic systems, Jesus uses, it starts with the story. It's about stories, of seeds and yeast, and he invites us to imagine the possibilities of a little lump of leaven causing this massive mound of dough to rise. It's actually a ridiculous amount of dough she's working with. It's actually a really funny story. And I feel very grateful for this guy, Dan, who brought us in on that kind of inside joke of the kingdom, of those kind of possibilities. And our youth ministry did kind of have a vibe of a movement to it. There was a lot of us that were, as I said, young enough and dumb enough to go, let's, I guess we can do this stuff, and we did see a lot of our friends start following Jesus with us. And we had this really strange, situation where we probably had, as many teenagers inside of this congregation at one point as there were adults. And it created this kind of strange sort of whitewater experience of all these, and it was the 80s, so people had mullets and ripped up jeans, and everybody was saying things like dude and gnarly. And I think having that being for me a very formative part of my faith set a trajectory and an expectation of wanting the good things to run wild. So I think that's kind of how that trajectory got set for me. So I don't know, does that answer the question? Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, it's beautiful. The phrase "let the good things run wild" is a phrase that we use often. Now I kind of know a little bit of where it maybe came from, hearing you say that. So I'd love to just hear you talk a little bit about the organic systems. It's an element of mDNA, but what do we mean when we say that? So you've talked a little bit about how you ended up into this movemental space, and we'll get into your story around Kansas City Underground and what's going on there. But before we jump into that, really, what do we mean when we say organic systems, and how would you define that in everyday language?
Yeah, it goes back to what I was saying about Jesus. When we're talking about organic systems, we're talking about, a very old reality. Think of the metaphors that Jesus used of seeds falling into soil, yeast working through dough, vines connecting through branches, bodies with many parts. So none of those are static images. They're these dynamic, interconnected, um, interdependent, um, relational, alive images of what it means to actually be um, connected to God and each other. And underneath organic systems, then there needs to be structures that serve the life but don't replace it. So in the underground, we talk a lot about how we want there to be just enough trellis. So trellises don't make grapes, they just hold them. And you want just enough so it can flourish. So the church is actually the life. And the systems are they need to be light, flexible. They're always there just to be in service of the Spirit's work. They shouldn't control it. They're there to protect it, to extend it. So our systems should always serve it and never replace it. And every time they begin to stifle it, strangle it, then we're in a danger zone. And again, it's like the skeleton doesn't create blood, or organs or body parts. It simply provides the form so the body can function. So that's what we're saying when we're talking organic systems. We're talking about the way the body naturally works. Jesus is the head. There's all these parts, and the Spirit is the source of life. And our system should be designed to serve that life and not suffocate it.
Yeah, that's good. And helpful to give kind of a framework of what we mean by organic systems. Um, I'm kind of in this space where I get to lead with the Kansas City Underground, but I also get to lead with 100 Movements. I'm trying not to put the Kansas City Underground hat on, but I
That's
kind of
okay
like
because
it.
you have the Kansas City Underground wall behind you.
That's true. um, I guess I want you to take it a little further with kind of extrapolate the idea out further. Like why has it been important for us as we've thought about movement? And we go as an organization that's thinking about movemental Christianity. We thought, hey, let's not build too rigid of a structure. And some of that was a reaction to the structures that we came from that are very like, hey, this is how we do it, and then it produces this. But when you have organic systems, how those need to be able to be reproduced and how those need to be able to adjust and adapt in different places. Does that make sense what I'm asking? Like
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
play it out a little
definitely.
more practically.
Yeah. So, for example, when um, we existed years before we existed. So that, and when we have conversations with folks that are starting, we just tell them like, don't worry about having an organization. Just go and be. Go to the people and the place that God has sent you and live deeply there, love well there, exegete like the place and that God has sent you to, understand its rhythms and its ways, and love the people He sent you to, and see where Jesus is at work, and plant the gospel and make disciples, and then let a new extended spiritual family emerge, and then let just wait until there's a family of families. Don't worry about a 501(c) or some kind of big structure or organization. Kind of wait as long as you can, and don't try to get. Don't worry about the logos or the website or organizing something that has a brand, because what will happen is the muscle memory for people in the West with like 1700 years of history of Christendom it's going to snap back to the old frame of quote unquote church, which is going to be that sort of pyramid model of, well, there's going to be the clergy and there's going to be the laity and there's going to be the more rigid structures of like, where's the weekend service? And then ministry is like a program that people volunteer. It's just so deep in people. So, and for us, in the Kansas City Underground, we're working very hard to try to resist that, gravitational pull. So even when we did organize, we didn't organize as a church plant. We organized as a mission agency. And our whole mission is just basically a retranslation of Ephesians chapter 1. We want to fill Kansas City with the beauty, justice, and good news of Jesus. And our vision is a disciple maker on every street, and a microchurch in every network of relationships. So it's just us being the fullness of him who fills everything in every way. So our mission is basically looking at ordinary folks and saying, what's your masterpiece mission? Like, who has God sent you to? And what are your gifts? What's your passion? What's your story? Like, we've kind of flipped the model. It's not like there's us coming to people and saying, here's our mission and here's our vision, and we want you to come join us, and here's the program we're going to execute, and we want you to volunteer in our program. It's more like, no, who are you sent to? Who are you called to? How can we serve you as you accomplish the mission that God has sent you on? And the mission agency basically is just there to equip and coach ordinary folks as they become disciple makers and walk the disciple maker pathway in a particular context. And we're at this decentralized network with just one mission, and that's gospel flourishing. We want everyone everywhere in the city to be able to experience Jesus and experience gospel flourishing. And we know that happens when ordinary people are activated as disciple makers, like when there's a gospel presence there and a gospel demonstration and a gospel proclamation, and then these extended spiritual families emerge and they begin to have these rhythms of worship and community and mission. And so we're there to not to control them in some weird top-down way. We have these little hub teams, and we're like gardeners. We're trying to cultivate across the network what's needed so that the disciple makers and the microchurches flourish. And that might mean tools and training, relational kind of connections and scaffolding so the vine can keep growing and spreading. And that's what we're up to. And right now there's microchurches that have emerged in neighborhoods and prisons and high school campuses and different immigrant communities and affinity groups. And it's interesting because it's, most of the people that are in the underground don't even know they're in the underground. And that's organic systems. Like Jesus, Matthew 13 is one of my favorite chapters in the Bible because he's talking about the kingdom, and it's all these images of things that are almost invisible and hidden. So it's like, if you're doing this right, you almost can't see it.
That's fantastic. It's so good to hear you just articulate our tendency to snap back to the paradigm that we have, and even just the challenge for people who are listening and dreaming to not jump to a structure and not jump to creating this heavy space where things have to fit into, but instead let it just grow and flourish. So the other thing we mentioned at the top of this was that you wrote a book called Starfish and Spirit that explores new imagination for systems and for leadership, because what you're talking about is so counter what we're used to. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how that book emerged.
Yeah, it is, originally, another important story goes back to because of another mentor in my life, having the opportunity to have deep exposure to what became the disciple-making movement and church planting movement in southern India. And about year 5 into that story, when things really began to go exponential, that was the year, it was like 2006, which was, I think, the year Forgotten Ways actually came out. And it was that same year that the Starfish and the Spider came out. And I actually read both of those books on a trip to India, because it's like a 26 or 28 hour trip. There's a lot of time. And I actually had a speed reading course in high school. So I can read pretty fast. And it was amazing, like the fusion of these two books. One, which is basically about decentralized leadership. And it's funny, it's called like The Power of Leaderless Movements or something like that, The Starfish and the Spider, which is actually not true at all. And eventually, because of my friend Lance Ford, who actually became friends with Ori Brofman, who wrote that book, he didn't want that subtitle. Like the publishers basically forced it on there because they thought it would be controversial. Because his take, and it's my take too, is you actually have way more leadership, but exponentially more leadership through decentralized leadership, not less. It's not leader less. It's actually way more people leading. But the way these books work together, and it was describing what was happening on the ground in India, began to interpret so many things for me to help me understand what was happening. I remember literally getting off the plane and going into a room with all the leaders and picking up a marker and I put the mDNA on the board immediately. I was like, okay, I got to tell you guys about this book. There's these 6 elements. And trying to describe that to them. So that was the beginning of those 2 books becoming so very central to my own story, my own formation, and what's been a 20-year journey of following Jesus into a more primal, movemental form of the church. What I experienced there in southern India felt very much like walking around in the book of Acts. And then it creates this question in you about like, well, why not here? Why not us? And the mDNA was like a Rosetta Stone to help understand those dynamics. Like, okay, here's when these elements come together, the church returns to this form. And then Ori Brofman's book, again, gave a metaphor and some language to understand the form of leadership that's needed to help unlock that kind of form of the church. So basically, after 15 years of a lot of experiments and iteration and repentance and what I would call like some very limited success, that I had this sense of there was a lot of churches that we had interacted with in different coaching environments. And one of the things that I realized over the years is like, whenever I have to try to articulate this for someone else, it really does refine your own learning. And so Lance had this book deal with Ori, and they were going to do a book, like a version of Starfish. And I wasn't involved, but they basically reached out to me and said, hey, Lance got this prompting from the Holy Spirit, like, hey, we think you should be involved in this thing. We know you're doing like decentralized Starfish like stuff. And at that point, I was actually at West Side Family Church. And at Granger, we had started this other thing called Intermission, and we'd help with some church planting movements from 4 or 5 different countries. And at West Side, we kickstarted some church planting movements too. So they found all that really interesting, and they knew we were doing some microchurch stuff. So long story short, I was like fanboying big time over getting to know Ori a little bit. And they ended up inviting me to be a part of that project. And eventually Ori stepped out of it. And it was because of his wife and his lawyer and his agent having concerns about him riding with 2 evangelical pastors. As the rise of Christian nationalism took off, they just said they thought, even though neither one of us were Christian nationalists, they had concerns about his brand. But he was very kind. He contributed a lot and was a good coach along the way. And the heart for us with the book was basically trying to take those principles and saying, how can we make this a bit more practical for people? So the book is built around 7 different starfish, each one of them focusing on a particular aspect of decentralized leadership. And then each starfish kind of has either 5 principles or 5 postures or 5 practices around a particular aspect of decentralized leadership.
That's so good, man. I enjoyed sitting in this room listening to you guys read it, and that was we recorded it in this space. And it was it's just one of those books that like captures organic systems as well. I know it's not just about organic systems, but that idea that when you cut a starfish in half, you get 2 new starfish. You didn't kill the organization, right? The system, like the DNA is reproduced, so you can keep reproducing that wherever it goes, which is so key for, just this conversation around organic systems. So just with that idea of it's helping reimagine leadership, it's helping reimagine systems, it's helping think through how do we reproduce the system at every edge. Like, what are the barriers and breakthroughs for people? Like, as you've coached people through Starfish, as you've continued to write with that kind of narrative mindset framework, what's difficult for people to make that shift to go leadership as I've known it into this decentralized, organic flow of leadership? Like, what holds Western church leaders from embracing that?
Yeah, I think it's hard because most of us have been discipled by some form of modernity versus movement. So we love control. We like the idea of a perfect org chart, the rollout of a right program, the idea of, a predictable growth chart. And there's been, a social contract for the role of a pastor, to be kind of a captain of certainty. And there's been a lot of pressure for the pastor to be the expert, the CEO, the ultimate vision caster. And I think a lot of pastors are exhausted with that. They don't want to carry that. I think if you look at the statistics, the interviews that have been done with pastors and the dropout rate, those that are exiting the ministry, it's pretty apparent that the data is in. It's not sustainable. And And life in the kingdom just doesn't work that way. I love that Paul says that we're stewards of the mystery. And again, Jesus says the kingdom is like a seed. You plant it, you water it, it grows while you're sleeping, even though you don't know how's that working? Like, how's that happen? And that kind of relinquishment feels terrifying in a culture where we're addicted to certainty and control. So one aspect of it is sort of this whole outside pressure of a certain way of doing church and a certain scorecard, and relinquishing that can be very, very difficult for lots of reasons. One, because like the seminary trained you to do it this way. Basically, everybody who's a part of this congregation sort of expects it to happen this way. It's very difficult to reboot that system and to break that paradigm. And then on top of it, there's, our inner world. If a leader hasn't dealt with their own insecurity, their own need for recognition, we will design structures that centralize authority, spotlight ourselves. If my ego is the engine, the system is always going to be about control. And if I'm not doing that work and finding my rest in Christ, becoming free from needing to prove myself, if I'm not doing that work, I'm going to keep trying to feed my soul off of other people. And if I do the work, then I can design systems that release others. So like healthy systems flow from healthy souls is what I'm trying to say. So you've got the external pressures, but then there's also like the inner work that needs to be done. Like the inner world leaks into your systems. And so it can be very challenging because you have both the outside pressures and then the internal work that needs to be done.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I just hearing you talk about the importance of our internal world. It's something that, especially in leadership, we often gloss over because there's things to get done. There's tasks to accomplish. Um, so as we look to the future, I'm curious as why you would say that this element is essential. You've talked about mDNA in general and how all the interlinking is crucial, but why is organic systems so important? And what happens if we miss it and we keep clinging to our institutional structures and our rigid ways of doing things?
Yeah, my opinion at this point in time in our culture, it's not just a preference issue, it's going to be a survival issue. Um, History shows that when the church is rigid and it clings to an institutional form, eventually it calcifies, it becomes brittle, and then it breaks. And we're watching that happen in front of our eyes right now in real time. We're watching the greatest exit of people from the church, in North America. Even this week, there's been so much talk about, this quiet revival. But man, I read the article this week about the actual data of what's happening. And there's just no data to prove this quiet revival among Gen Z. It's very discouraging. I hate to be like Debbie Downer, you know what I mean? But they're still like the most irreligious generation in America, and I want to be a realist. It's like I actually want a genuine revival. I want a genuine spiritual awakening. You know what I mean? And I know there's some stuff going on in England that I hope is true, and I'm praying it's like, let it come, to North America. But I do know this, like when the church organizes as a living system, it is resilient. Persecution can't kill it. It will only multiply it. Scarcity won't shrink it. Complexity won't overwhelm it. It'll just flex. In an age of rapid change, what we need is not bigger, more complex institutions. We need deeper roots. We need lighter structures. Organic systems allow the church to be what it was always meant to be, a movement of ordinary people filled with the Spirit, able to embody the gospel in every crack and corner of society. And if we miss this, we're just going to keep managing decline. If we embrace it, we could see another movement of God in our day. And that's actually what's riding on this. If we keep clinging to our complex, institutionalized, overbearing structures, we will keep managing the decline of the church. If we embrace organic systems, we have the opportunity to see the church become a movement again, because it really ultimately is about unleashing the priesthood of all believers, like looking at every single child of God and saying there's a potential for a movement there. Like every single one of these people is a seed, and inside of the seed is the tree, and on the tree is the fruit. Inside of the fruit are more seeds. That's organic systems. Like, we need to look at every single person and go, that isn't a member, that's not an attender, that's not a volunteer. Those are all the institutional frame where we will manage decline. We need to look and go, that is a masterpiece, and that is the potential for a movement. That is a spiritual mother and father of a multi-generational family. That's God's design. That is organic systems. And until we begin to look at every single child of God that way, we are domesticating God's people.
Yeah. Woo. Well, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, man. Thanks for saying that word there. That's a strong word. So, that I'll sit with, and wish I'd have had that language the last few days as I was working with some leaders. But, so for people that are listening and they're feeling that same conviction where it's like, yes, all right, you're converting me. Something is happening in me too. And they want to start down this road. They're thinking, how do I bend toward organic systems? What would you say are like best tools, practices, next steps, and thinking through how we build organic systems in our context? Read your book.
No, I wouldn't say that. I'd say read the Bible, talk to Jesus, and I mean that, and begin with Jesus metaphors. Just begin to, really contemplate and meditate and say, like, how do I see the church? Do I really see it like a corporation? Or do I see it like a garden? Do I really see it, as a nonprofit led by professionals? Or do I really see it as a family? Do I see it like Jesus does, as a garden, vine? How do I see this? Like, ask the Lord to shift your deepest way of seeing. Because that's where the change flows from. So, don't skip that. Like, that's metanoia. It's like, Lord, change the way I see, at the deepest level. Help me to see what you see, Jesus. And just ask him to help you recover, a more primal way of seeing what he sees when it comes to the church. And then think about just simple ways we talk about the ecclesial minimum of worship, community, and mission. So worship is moving from unbelief to belief in every area of life. And community is about activating on all the one another's. And mission is about making disciples, making the kingdom really practical. So I'd encourage just really simple tools like Discovery Bible Study, which is a way of engaging the Bible that focuses on discovery and obedience and sharing. So you can go to Discovery. What's the web address again?
dbsgroups.com.
Yep, dbsgroups.com. If you want to learn about Discovery Bible Study, begin to engage that with a few people. And actually, work the process of discovery, obedience, and sharing, because that's worship. And community. You're going to begin to actually embody what it means to be the church if you actually embrace the principles and postures of discovery Bible study. Another thing I would encourage you to check out is the bless rhythms of begin in prayer, listen and engage, eat, serve, story. You can dig into that. Go to caseyunderground.org, look at Toolkit. You can download the Bless Pocket Guide. We've got a training huddle on that. Begin to just ask God, where are my people? Where's my place? And begin to develop those bless rhythms.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, I would encourage you to try to go down the rabbit hole on Ephesians 4 and understanding APEST, apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, teachers, figuring out which one of these is kind of your primary. And then with your immediate community, the church, understanding how the others around you are gifted, and beginning to collaborate around that giftedness, because that is actually the ministry of Jesus.
Yeah.
Like that's Jesus living through his body. And the more we are collaborating with those, the more the fullness of Jesus is being represented. So, shift the metaphor. Discovery Bible study is a way to sort of begin to walk into worship, community, and mission. Bless rhythm, same thing. And then with your community, start pressing into APEST together. I think that alone, that's plenty to get you going.
Yeah. That's a lot, actually.
It's a lot. Seriously, it's a lot. Like that's all the stuff.
Yeah, it is.
You need to get going.
Yeah. It's all the stuff you need to get going, but it'll take a lifetime to work out. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Rob, for taking some time today to kind of give us, a picture into organic systems. I just, for those that are listening, if you want to take some next steps just out of this, if the idea is interesting to you, Rob was mentioning APES, which we had an episode on this. You can go to 5Q Central. You'll connect with Lindsay, learn more about that. You can also go to, is it starfishu.com?
Oh, Substack.
Substack.starfishu.com.
See, I don't even know my own Starfishu. Starfishu.substack.com. There it is.
Yeah, and that's YOU, not just the letter U.
That's right.
But you can go deeper into that. You can pick up Starfish in the Spirit, read through that. But yeah, just thanks for hanging with us today. Again, as we say every week, if the episode
actually, there's a whole thing on APES today, man. It's your little video about the garden.
That's true. There is.
Oh, go check it out.
Except when they watch this today, will have been a few months ago.
That's true. That's true. It'll be past tense.
You might have to scroll back quite a ways, but yeah, we say, if the episode was intriguing, interesting, share it with somebody, have a conversation with them. Consider how you might begin to work these out in your context. You can always take the mDNA strengths assessment at 100movements.com to explore your own leadership with these 6 elements. You can join in the conversation at community.100movements.com. And if you want to, again, go deeper into organic systems apart from Starfish, you can check out Kansas City Underground resources. Rob mentioned it, kcunderground.org/toolkit. A lot of these are tools about how we think through multiplication at every point. So again, Rob, thanks for hanging with us. You can check out all the episodes on mDNA that have come before this. And we'll say, see you next time on the 100 Movements podcast.
Grace and peace.